My father was a retired doctor who had moved to Philadelphia to be near his children and grandchildren, all of whom live in the Philadelphia area. And as a doctor, he was very conscious of, not obsessively, but he was very conscious of, what he should eat, what he shouldn't eat. And he was told to carefully watch his diet and eat a lot of protein. And he decided that the best source of protein for him would be turkey.
I had just graduated high school in 1993, and I started my first semester at the University of Alabama. I didn't eat on campus very much. There were fast food places around and a couple of just local restaurants right by campus, so I didn't really cook much in the dorm.
Alex is a great little kid. He just had the most heartwarming smile. He was a very giving little boy. It was summertime, and the frozen ground beef patties that you buy at the grocery store were just a staple in our diet. And it was just very easy. I mean, it was a very quick meal to prepare. You took the patties, you threw it on the barbecue grill, you're done in no time. And then one day Alex was complaining about a stomach ache. I could see that he was in quite a bit of distress. And I slept with him that night, and first thing in the morning took him to the pediatrician. And my first thoughts were, it was very unusual, but first thoughts were maybe it's appendix, maybe he's having appendicitis.
Started out, thought it was the stomach flu that everybody talks about. Started having diarrhea and vomiting, and I woke up every hour on the hour having to go to the bathroom. The next morning, I called my brother, who is also a student at the same university, and asked him for a ride to the Student Health Center.
He got very sick, and my sister and brother-in-law took him to the emergency room at the hospital of the University of Pennsylvania. And they admitted him for tests, and they couldn't quite figure out what was going on. They were really baffled.
Pediatrician said, get him to the hospital right away, which we did. We admitted him right away. And that's when he first started showing signs of diarrhea, except it wasn't diarrhea in his case. He just started hemorrhaging blood. And I realized that he was in very, very serious condition.
Still going downhill. At that point, my mom came up and stayed in the hospital with me, sleeping in the hospital room. And she could tell that if something didn't happen soon, if I wasn't diagnosed soon, that I was going to die.
And someone had the idea to call in an infectious disease specialist, and my sister and brother-in-law called me and said, you're not going to believe this, because they don't believe it, but Dad has a case of listeriosis.
After I had been sick for almost a week, I was finally diagnosed. They consulted with some doctors at another hospital. They thought it was probably a foodborne illness, that it was probably E. coli.
My father was in the hospital for, I think, about 2 weeks. Came out and, it really hit him in the stomach like a sledgehammer in the stomach. And I mean, he basically died at the end of November, so about 3.5 months later he had died.
In the space of 4 days, he went through an agonizing illness that destroyed all of his organs, caused his brain to swell so badly that they had to put brain shunts into his head, drill shunts into his head, holes in his head. His lung collapsed, which they had to frantically shove a hose in his side to reinflate.
My uncle drove my grandparents up to the hospital to see me. And when they left, they thought that was going to be the last time they saw me.
He started suffering tremors and had delusions, and that's when I realized that we were losing him. And then he had he was hooked up to, so he had finally a massive seizure. And that's when they put him on a respirator and went into a coma and died. All of this in the space of 4 days. Just massive, massive, massive destruction. We wanted to donate organs because Alex was a giver. And I know he would want to give. That's just his nature. And everything was destroyed. Everything. His brain, part of his brain was liquefied.
The CDC estimates that each year there are 48 million cases of foodborne illness among Americans. There are 128,000 hospitalizations and over 3,000 deaths. That's over 8 people a day dying from contaminated food.
It's not necessary. It can be prevented.
Well, I mean, everybody's a potential a victim of this. I mean, there's no way that someone, you don't walk into a supermarket or to a deli and order turkey meat and have some kind of a detector on you that detects listeriosis.
We cannot manage our kitchens and control contamination down to the size of a microbe. We just can't do it. That's why we have to count on industry and government to do their jobs at the source of the contamination. All we can do as consumers is minimize that risk once it comes to us.
STOP has been instrumental in a lot of the changes we've seen in the food industry over the last decade.
We are not interested in just pointing fingers and saying, you goofed up, you did this wrong, it's your fault. What we're interested in doing is sitting down with these people, with all of the stakeholders in this issue, and working collaboratively to find answers.
Really what's happened here is that for whatever reason, we've gone backward a lot in the regulation and preservation of a healthy food supply.
If it means we have to pay 2 or 3 cents more per pound for beef, I think that's worth it. I think it's worth it for Stuart's dad to be here. I think it's worth it for Nancy's son to be here. I think it's worth it for me to have my spleen back. When something like this happens to you, I don't see how you can sit by and just let it continue happening to other people and those who have lost children. I'm one of the lucky ones. With everything that I've been through, I'm one of the lucky ones. So if I can help out and be a voice for those who aren't here, that's what I have to do.
When you hear dry statistics,
48
million illnesses,
128,000
hospitalizations,
and 3,000
3,000 deaths, they don't mean anything until you attach a face, a story, and a life to those statistics. Those statistics, every one of those stand for a human being who have dreams and loves and passions. And it's not until you put a little redheaded kid whose nose was too small to hold up his glasses that it becomes real.